Today we're going to be creating 4 dupes from one of my favorite places to get inspired, Etsy. I love this piece so much, and I always struggle to find window pieces at thrift stores, and I'm like, let's create one using these small frames from Dollar Tree. We're just going to remove the hardware since we're not going to be using them, and we're not going to throw it away. Okay. We're not going to be wasting perfectly good craft supplies we can hoard for later on for a project we might use that we don't even know what it is in the future, but we're just going to put it to the side. I almost kept these little metal pieces on because I really wanted to keep the glass in there, but if you've ever messed with Dollar Tree frames, you know that that glass is a little sketchy and it's really thin. So I didn't want a chance leaving it in there, and I knew I was going to be using this for staging at different aspects, so I didn't want to happen to accidentally break the glass. So I felt like let's just remove all of these, and a pair of needle nose pliers did the job. I decided to match up all the little holes where the screws were right in the center. If you want, you could fill these with wood putty, use some caulk. This will kind of get rid of that, and then you can sand it down. I decided not to do any of that. To attach the pieces, I'm going to use some tacky glue to start off and some hot glue. And the cool thing about making a frame is you only have to really do this on 2 pieces and on 2 sides. And then just kind of smush them right on in there, hold it in place for a second, and then move on to the next frame. The tacky glue is going to give us a long lasting hold, while the hot glue is going to give us a quick hold, grabbing everything and keeping it in place while the tacky glue dries. And people, be careful while you're doing this, because if you're not paying attention as you're pressing everything down, you could possibly be gluing it to the table. Uh-oh. Not again. Okay. I did decide it was going to be in my best interest to take my little finger sander here and just sand down the raised area that is around where the screws left. I know, Brandy, you don't want to fill the hole, but you want to sand the hole. Listen, I have complete confidence in the paint that we're going to be using, that it's going to smush in the holes and kind of fill everything in on its own and even it all out. Once I got all the gunk out in between the windows and it dried, it is time to bring in the stapler. I'm gonna just pop some of these suckers in the back of our frame just to ensure that the frame is going to hold for the long haul. And especially if you want it to create an even larger window frame and use more of these pieces, this is a really good idea. The fact that these are like a thick MDF just makes this little dupe even more sturdier. Not all of the frames at Dollar Tree are created equal, and I wouldn't trust putting staples in all of them. But these are fabulous. Now it's time to paint this sucker up. Grab whatever color paint you want. I'm using DIY's clay base chalk paint and putting 2 layers on this beautiful frame, and that is it for this one. For this dupe, I could have grabbed these exact glass pieces at Dollar Tree, but instead I grabbed these. Oh yeah, they had these in a pack of 4, and I'm like, let's give these a layer of black paint and a layer of white paint and shove some greenery in here. They're gonna look super high end and also be super easy and super simple. Who is proud of me? I am continuing the trend into 2024 to make sure that every video I have a super simple, easy project. And this one, it can't get much easier than some layers of paint. I just did a black chalk layer and then did 2 white chalk layers on top, making sure to keep the distressing look. If you want to add a little layer of Mod Podge on top of these, you can right ahead. That will help seal this in. I did take some gingham rhythm and add on here to make it look a little bit more like our original. I simply love this piece that I found on Etsy. We're going to use Dollar Tree's bamboo rings, and yes, I know they have the metal shape hearts, but I don't like messing with those wreaths. They always give me hand grip strength issues. Use whatever base you want. I had this little piece of scrap wood just laying around and grabbed 2 tumbling tower blocks to take some tacky glue and some hot glue and attach our bamboo ring right into the center of this. I made sure to not overlap the tacky glue and the hot glue, so this way they didn't cancel each other out. I let this dry for about 30 minutes and then came back in with some antique Waverly wax just to add a little bit of a brown hue. Obviously, put whatever color you want on here. I wanted to keep this fairly neutral. Now for the fun part. This way you can't say you haven't been warned. Now, it looks simple enough. You just wrap some yarn or twine, or I'm using this rope stuff I picked up from Dollar Tree, tying it on the end. I add a little bit of glue here and then wrap it around. It looks simple enough, right? Wrong. Here's what that beautiful deceiving picture was showing us that I completely ignored. You need like a yarn or a twine, something thinner. You need to wrap that sucker like 50 times. And the reason is, when you go to stick your little floral pieces in there, if you don't have a lot of stuff to hold them in place, they're going to teeter-totter back and forth just like a swing, and getting them to actually sit still in your twine is a pain. However, everything else here, wrapping it on one side, tying it, adding a little bit of glue to hold it in place, and then when you get to the end, connect it on the same side just by tying it and adding a little bit more glue. My rope twine is on there really, really well. However, I just don't have enough. I could have used another 20 wraps because adding the florals in this piece absolutely sucked. And don't get me wrong, I feel like the piece turned out incredible. However, I do think I like the original just a little bit more. I love me some cutting board decor, and it being fall themed here doesn't scare me in the least, because I had these beautiful gems I picked up from Dollar Tree in their plus section a while back, and if you can believe it, they were only $3 each, so I made sure to grab a couple so I had for all the DIYs I plan on making when I think of them. For the decoupage part, we're going to use this paper that I grabbed from Hobby Lobby. If you are not familiar with Hobby Lobby, they have a ton of decorative paper you can get really inexpensively, and I just love this sheet. For our attachment, we're going to use the iron-on method with the Deco Art Decoupage in the mat. And since we're using paper and a piece of MDF, I want to come in heavy with our medium. If you've never done the iron-on method before, or you're not familiar with decoupage, the iron-on method is one of the most flawless ways for you to get no wrinkles. It does take a little bit of time and patience, and you want to make sure you put on a healthy, thick layer, especially around the edges. If you're using thicker paper, I like to make sure that it's even more. It took 2 hours for this to dry. Check out how cool this is. Now that it's all dried up, you can actually see the line. It's so thick. I'm just using a Cricut iron to apply this to here. Make sure that you have your paper in the exact spot that you want it to go. You're not going to get a second shot at this. If you're new to decoupage, or you're always wondering how to keep wrinkles at bay with whatever you're applying paper, napkins, or tissue paper to, iron-on method is absolutely the best way to get a flawless look. This is basically going to melt your paper to the project. Once your piece is ironed on here, go ahead and remove the excess. I'm using a little finger sander for that, and as you can see, I'm just kind of making swiping motions downward. It's a good idea when you do projects like this just in case it's not completely dry, not to go side to side when you're using sandpaper. If you do go side to side, especially with a harsh sandpaper and it's not dry, you can pull the paper from one side to the next. This kind of ensures that even if you're rushing it a little bit and not waiting for it to dry, the paper isn't going to be torn side to side. It's just going to come straight off. But as you can see, I waited for it to be completely dry and made sure that I sanded properly, and it's absolutely gorgeous. For the little top part, I just decided to cut down some burlap. If I had the ribbon, I would have just used that as well in the burlap, but I didn't. I had this big section of fabric, so I cut it to size, making sure there was enough overhang to wrap around the back, and then cut another section so we had a little stripe at the top. I did take my Cricut iron to this to flatten it out so it was nice and neat looking, because it looked a little jacked right there. And when I was happy with that, it was time to bring in the stapler. I want to make sure that this fabric is going to stay on here once I apply it, and stapling around the back is going to help ensure that that takes place. I also grabbed the tacky glue and smooshed a little line on here before I wrap the piece around. I've had really good results using tacky glue with fabric whenever I am applying it to anything, and I mean glass, ceramic, wood, MDF. Results just happen to be consistent across the board. The piece will stay in place. Obviously, you have to put enough on there that it will matter. You can't just use a little smooshing dot. You have to use a healthy amount, and it dries clear, so you never really know it's there anyway. Once I had the burlap safely secured around the edges and our tacky glue in place, I felt like it needed a little bit of something extra and grabbed this metal lace from Dollar Tree. It's a little wonky messing with it, but if you take a second and just kind of straighten it out, you can also use tacky glue on this, and it sticks really well also. I put a nice healthy thick layer and then wrapped it around the sides and stapled that down as well. Every now and then when I'm stapling something in, the staple doesn't go in all the way, so I like to grab my hammer and do a little tappity tap 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 on that sucker to get it back in place. And then sometimes it doesn't go as planned. Ow! 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 Mother... I did decide to add some florals and skip putting the little clothespin in the center. I love it just like it is. As always, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today, people, and until next time. Bye!